I, 25M, ruined my girlfriend's, 28F, college graduation and she's giving me grief for it months later. Hello. I don't want to be content for your YouTube channel. If that's your purpose, go away. My GF finished college back in January. It's been a long road for her. Medical issues, mental problems and a change of major meant that her 5-year degree took 7. Graduated college a couple of years ago, and have been working ever since. The run-up to her graduation was rough. She was stressed about her thesis, and I essentially didn't have a partner for 3 months. I took care of everything at home, I helped her write her assignment, and I'm having a hard time keeping up at work. So I'm working maybe 5 to 10 hours of overtime every week. For her graduation, I pulled out as many stops as I could. Her friends came to surprise her at a COVID-approved distance outside our window. I made sure champagne was ready, and I had to leave the flat for a work thing, but came back ASAP when she had her final defense and got her grade. Which was the top one, of course, since she's brilliant and poured her heart into this. I'd made sure her work got her flowers, and a lot of her family and friends remembered as well. We lived in a greenhouse for a good few days afterwards as they kept trickling in. Anyway, we then went to pick up sushi of her choosing from her favorite place. Now, for some context, I've been going through a rough time recently. I've been incredibly stressed, I'm in a new therapy schedule, and I felt very alone for months leading up to that day. On the day, work was particularly brutal. I'd felt like screaming the entire day. When I graduated college, nobody really noticed. My girlfriend did a little thing with some champagne, but that was it. We did go out to eat as well. So, when we were sat down for dinner, the immediate excitement of her grade and her finally finishing faded. The last 4 months of emotional void kept creeping up on me, the stress of that particular awful day, and as much as I hate to admit it, a twinge of jealousy that she's being celebrated so much more than I was. As we were eating dinner, I was fighting back tears. I don't know what the fuck happened to me. She could tell something was up, and I couldn't keep up the facade for too long. I apologized profusely and went to get my shit together in the bathroom for a bit. I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't very fun for the rest of the evening. Here's the problem, she's telling me I ruined her graduation from college. That particular word was used, I've ruined it. She told me a few days later, in tears, that I had to make up for it somehow. I asked her what to do, and she said just do what they do in a movie. Now, she'll pull this line out occasionally. It's an awful line, but I know what she means. She wants an over-the-top gesture, and it's pretty obvious that she wants me to stage a new, fake graduation that I don't fuck up. But I'll be honest, it's hard. I just don't have the energy to do it. She'll bring it up now and again, and every time, she reiterates the same thing. The longer I wait, the more special and perfect it has to be. I don't do well under that kind of pressure. In fact, I hate it pretty intensely. So now I'm completely demotivated to do it, and I still feel a little betrayed. On one hand, I get that she wanted the day to be all about just her. On the other hand, I feel like I did everything I'm supposed to. I didn't mean to get upset. I didn't get angry, or lash out, or forget something, or fail to plan something up to code. I felt really shitty and started crying. And finally, I felt like it was the final day that was all about her on the tail end of 4 months where my needs, emotional or physical, didn't exist. What the fuck do I do? How do I talk to her about this in a way that doesn't result in me feeling awful? TL, doctor, stress, emotional problems and general badness got the best of me during girlfriend's college graduation dinner. I've now ruined it and she expects an over-the-top new fake graduation to compensate. Do like they do in a movie, invite all her friends together, lock them in a room, and design a series of physical and psychological tortures. Your GF dismissed your feelings on graduation day, and is upset that you aren't addressing her feelings by jumping through a whole bunch of hoops for her entertainment. This attitude will continue if you don't address it. Never trust someone who expects real life to be like the movies. There's a million things that are wrong with this situation and I'm sure they've all been said, but what infuriates me the most is just do what they do in a movie. First of all, what does that even mean? Secondly, you're not in a movie, you're living real, probably mundane to her, lives. How naive do you have to be to think that kind of exaggerated romance can just be conjured up effortlessly, and how conceited do you have to be to think you deserve it when you would never do the same? If my partner had done for me during my 80 to 100 hour capstone weeks what you did for her, I would laud her for her help, not demand a picture-perfect graduation party as the dust is settling. Honestly, it's a thing she'll say now and again, and I connect it to almost Pavlovian eye rolling. I've yet to understand exactly what it means. No relationship should ever be this hard. You reacted the way you did because you were at your emotional breaking point and being neglected. You're pouring too much energy into a person that gives you no reward in return. Now, she wants to take you to the brink again, because guess what? Nothing is good enough for people like her. They're emotional vampires. She's immature, and you deserve better. There's a context to this that I didn't think was immediately relevant, but it might be. She may have lost her once-in-a-lifetime graduation day, in her words, but she had a depression while we were long distance around 4 years ago. I drove 6 hours round trip every weekend for a year to visit her. I didn't have a social life in my new city for the first year here because she hadn't moved here yet. I'm not going to get being 21 years old back either, but I made that sacrifice because I wanted to help her. I can't help but worry that she wouldn't do the same. If I may be so bold, it kind of sounds like you've spent a long time attending to her needs above yours, so I ask you, when does she attend to you? You should in an equal partnership. Who is taking care of you right now? Because you've just told us you're spent and that's okay. We all get spent sometimes. The key is to surround ourselves with people that help build us back up, not make things all about them. I know this doesn't answer your question directly, but I really want you to take stock of how things are in your life and honestly examine your relationship. Rarely, not good at expressing my needs, though, so it's not all on her. She'll do nice things for me now and again. It's not that, it's just that when the chips are down, I have to be the glue every time. That's okay, but I'm really down about this because at least she could be appreciative of it. My BF, 20, told me, 20F, he wouldn't have children with me because my genes would make it unethical. What do I do? It's a little early for having children, but the conversation came up again because we've been together a little while. I have a history of cancer and disease in my family, although all of my grandparents are still alive. On my dad's side, my grandfather had stomach cancer and my grandmother had breast cancer, thyroid problems, heart problems, open heart surgery, diabetes and high blood pressure. On my mum's side, she and my aunt had cervical cancer at around age 30. My mum has also had skin cancer 3 times before she turned 40 and currently has thyroid problems, while my dad has high blood pressure and heart problems. I had a benign tumor removed for something non-heritable and my doctors and I are extra vigilant about moles. I have already had one removed, but it wasn't melanoma. Other than that, we don't really know what is heritable from my family and I've been meaning to be genetically checked. My brothers are perfectly healthy, obligatory touch wood, and generally, my health is pretty alright. Yesterday, I mentioned an MRI scan I had booked to my boyfriend, who knows about my health issue, and later on when the conversation shifted to children, he told me my genes were too poor for him to want to have children with me. I took a double take when he said this. He confessed to me that while he'd always wished me well, my family history and my poor health made him a little uncomfortable. I've only got internal scar tissue acting up, and that he tended to avoid dating unwell girls, but I was different. He also didn't want to ruin his children that way by giving them faulty genes. He told me it was unethical for me to ever have children. I have no idea how to respond to this. I got very upset and it made me feel very poor about myself. I told him this and he apologized and tried to shift the mood and say that's not how I meant it. The real kicker here, his grandparents on his dad's side died when his dad was 8 of severe diabetes/heart-related issues. And he's meant to get checked to see if he's at risk. We are quite literally in the same boat. I'm quite stuck now. This sense of elitism that came from him and the fact that having children is very important to me, not very Gen Z of me, I know, has really put me off. He insists that's not how he meant it, but there's not much other way to interpret it, and I feel like this will always be a sore spot. Is it worth communicating with him? He doesn't seem very educated about the situation and we're quite young, or is this an unfixable thing? Edit, just to clarify a few things, while my family medical history is poor, it can be pretty easily explained. My parents and grandparents were raised in a poor communist state in the Mediterranean while I'm currently in the UK. My grandfather has had poorly treated gastric ulcers since he was in his teens, so it's not much of a surprise he developed stomach cancer. My grandmother is slightly overweight, and recently developed type 2 diabetes, but she has always had a few issues with her heart and hypertension. About the skin cancer risk, my mum is rather pale for the Mediterranean. When she was younger, sunscreen didn't exist in her country and she was regularly outside, which must have increased her risk. But my brothers and I do have an above average number of moles, so we are cautious. I have also had the HPV vaccine for cervical cancer, which significantly reduces my risk. I do still plan to get genetically tested though. I wasn't sure whether it would be worth making excuses for my family history to him because he didn't know the details, or whether his response meant that we couldn't work out. I would ask for clarification about whether or not he intends to pass along his faulty genes as well. If this is an ethical stance that he feels strongly enough about to not want to pass on his own potential risk factors, then I wouldn't necessarily be angry or upset that he said it. It may have been insensitive in the way he presented it, but it's not necessarily a terrible position to have. My ex-husband passed on a genetic condition to our son that he mistakenly spent his whole life thinking was due to damage during a complicated birth. Blame parents, doctors, etc. for not giving him the correct information, but he spent his whole life believing his thyroid condition was because his thyroid was damaged due to low oxygen at birth. His twin sister has cerebral palsy because of the birth. When our son was diagnosed with the same condition, it broke his heart. He felt so guilty that our son was going to have to go through daily medications, injections, testosterone therapy, and a whole host of other things that he had himself endured as a child. He vowed to never have another one, and got a vasectomy within the next few months. I fully supported this decision and understood it. This attitude in itself is not alarming. However, if his family also has genetic issues that he may pass down as well, but somehow doesn't think the same standard applies to him, then that's a totally douche move. Not wanting to pass on potential issues that may cause unnecessary suffering is not a bad thing. There are plenty of options for building a family that are just as wonderful as having your own kids. But you need this clarification before you can evaluate this fully. Well, after my husband and I had kids, we were diagnosed with autoimmune conditions, both a mental disorder or two, me, and a chronic pain condition, him. We have passed our incredibly awesome conditions down to our kids and we feel very guilty about it. Had we known about these things beforehand, we probably wouldn't have chosen to have biological children. So I understand where he's coming from with that. But if that doesn't work for you, move on. You're so young. And in case my kid is reading this, she likes to stalk my account. We don't regret having you girls at all. Just regret passing this crap to you. I, F28, am taller than my husband, M28, and people, even total strangers, constantly comment about it. This one is a little more light-hearted than a lot of the other posts on here, so I hope people don't mind. It's just something that gets on my nerves, and I want to ask some advice. We've been together since high school, and while my husband takes it on the chin, I just can't believe how many people make comments about his height directly to his face. People will crack jokes about him and then earnestly expect me to laugh along like they're in the right. I don't know how many times someone has expected me to side with them, a total stranger, instead of with my best friend and the father of my children. If I had $1 for every time someone leaned into me and whispered conspiratorially that my partner must be inadequate in bed, like they're doing me some favor and I'm supposed to be relieved to have the opportunity to make fun at the only person I consistently like in this world. I'd be able to take our whole family on vacation. Why do people do that? Why do they feel entitled to make us feel like a sideshow for their amusement? I'm not even that much taller. I'm 5 feet 6 inches to his 5 feet 3 inches. Half the time I think it's less about him shorter than his wife and more that they just consider him to be plain old short, as if that's some grand sin that deserves constant othering and comments. I've talked to him about it. He always tells me it doesn't bother him that much and that I should never give them the energy of getting upset about it, but, once again, he's my best friend in this life. The fact that people always expect me to side with them about it is just so eerie. What could their relationships be like if that's what they expect? Sometimes, Reddit, you come up with wonderfully creative solutions to things. What can I do? I know very tall people go through a similar thing as well. Constant comments from total strangers, even ones that are sexually inappropriate. Does anyone have any advice on how I can respond to this without having to either giggle shyly and agree, or be the bad guy taking things too seriously and be told, it's just a joke?